What if a life hanging by a thread could lead to the family you never had? After escaping death in the forest, Diem is rushed to the hospital just in time to save her leg. In her weakest moments, an elderly woman, a stranger, nurtures Diem like her own child. Their bond grows deeper when Diem, an orphan, asks to call her mother. But another heart is still waiting, Toan, who searches the wilderness for Diem, not knowing she has survived. Watch this emotional journey of love, family, and reunion. Subscribe now and follow their story of fate and second chances. The emergency room was a blur of white coats and urgent footsteps when the elderly woman burst through the hospital doors, half carrying, half dragging Diem's frail body in her arms. The nurses rushed forward the moment they saw the state of the young woman, her legs swollen, discolored, and on the verge of gangrene. Time was the enemy now. They wheeled Diem away on a gurney, disappearing into the sterile corridors while the old woman stood back, gasping for breath, her eyes glistening with fear and prayers. Hours passed, each minute heavier than the last. The old woman sat hunched in a corner of the waiting room, her withered hands clutching the faded scarf she never parted with. She stared blankly ahead, but inside, her mind replayed the harrowing scene of finding Diem unconscious and burning with fever in the depths of the forest. She had acted on instinct, driven by a compassion she had long thought buried in her solitary life. She didn't know the girl, didn't know her name, but she knew she couldn't let another soul be swallowed by the forest's unforgiving darkness. Finally, the doors to the operating room opened, and a doctor approached her with a grave but gentle expression. "We were able to control the infection," he said. "Another few hours, and we might have had to amputate. But she's safe now. She'll need time to recover, but she'll walk again." The old woman collapsed onto the chair in relief, her tears falling freely. She whispered a silent thank you to the heavens, clutching her scarf tighter as if it were the hand of fate itself. When she was allowed to see Diem, she entered the recovery room quietly, her steps careful and reverent, as though afraid to disturb the fragile line between life and death the girl had just crossed. Diem lay there, pale and weak, her breathing shallow but steady. Her leg was bandaged heavily, and drip feeding her veins, but at least she was alive. The old woman pulled a chair beside the bed, sitting there for hours, watching the girl sleep, occasionally wiping beads of sweat from her brow or adjusting the blanket to keep her warm. When Diem stirred for the first time, her eyes fluttering open with confusion and pain, the old woman was already at her side, her lined face soft with relief. "You're safe now, child," she whispered, holding Diem's hand gently. "You're in the hospital. They saved your leg." Diem tried to speak, her throat dry, her mind foggy. She caught a glimpse of the woman's face worn by years, yet her eyes held a kindness that made Diem's heart ache. She didn't know who this woman was, but for the first time in days, she didn't feel utterly alone. The old woman didn't leave her side. She fed her spoonfuls of porridge when she was strong enough to eat, sat quietly when she needed to rest, and hummed old folk songs to lull her back to sleep. The hospital staff began to whisper about them, the lonely old lady who had brought in a stranger yet cared for her as if she were her own blood. For Diem, each moment of awakening became a little brighter, not just because her body was healing, but because of the presence of this unexpected guardian. In that sterile hospital room, surrounded by machines and antiseptic air, Diem began to feel something she hadn't felt in a long time, comfort, and the warmth of a human connection she thought she had lost forever. As the days passed, Diem's strength gradually returned. The fever subsided, the color returned to her cheeks, and the unbearable pain in her leg eased into a dull throb. Each morning, when her eyes opened, the first person she saw was always the old woman, sitting by her bedside with a gentle smile and a bowl of warm porridge ready. Diem was no longer a patient to her, she was family, though neither of them had spoken that truth aloud just yet. One afternoon, when the hospital corridor was quiet and the sun cast a golden hue through the window, Diem finally gathered enough strength to sit up on her own. The old woman helped prop her up with pillows, her hands still steady despite their wrinkles. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light dance on the walls, until curiosity and affection pushed Diem to speak. "Grandma," she said softly, her voice still fragile, "why did you help me that day in the forest? You didn't even know who I was." The old woman chuckled, the sound dry but full of warmth. "Because I've lived too many years with no one to call my own," she admitted, her eyes misty but proud. "I have no children, no husband. My house is quiet, my days long. When I saw you lying there, lost and close to death, I couldn't bear to leave you. It was as if fate had sent you to me." Diem felt a lump rise in her throat. She had no family either, no mother to call in the middle of the night, no father's shoulder to lean on when the world grew cold. She had grown up in orphanages, moving from place to place, never truly belonging anywhere. And yet here, with this woman who was a stranger just days ago, she felt something she'd been craving all her life, a home in someone's heart. Silence fell between them again, but this time it was heavy with unsaid feelings. Diem's fingers clutched the blanket tightly, her heart pounding with a decision she'd never thought she'd make. She turned to the woman, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to repay you," Diem whispered, "but I've been alone my whole life too. I don't have parents, I don't even know where I come from. Would it be too much if I asked you to be my mother? My real mother?" The old woman stared at her, stunned, her breath catching in her throat. Then, slowly, her eyes filled with tears, and her hands trembled as she reached out to hold Diem's face between them. "You would call me mother," she choked out, her voice cracking with emotion. "After all these years. I never thought anyone would say that to me." Diem nodded, her tears falling freely now. "If you'll have me," she said, "I want to be your daughter. I want to have someone to come home to." Without another word, the old woman pulled Diem into her arms, embracing her tightly, as if afraid she might vanish if she let go. They wept together, their sobs echoing softly in the sterile hospital room, two lonely souls finding solace and belonging in each other. From that moment, something shifted between them. The hospital walls, once cold and impersonal, now felt like the walls of a new home built not of bricks, but of love and second chances. For DM, the old woman was no longer a savior, she was her mother. And for the old woman, DM was the daughter she had longed for all her life. Days turned into weeks, and DM's recovery progressed faster than the doctors expected. The love and care of her newfound mother seemed to breathe life into her weary soul. Her leg, though still weak, had healed remarkably. Each time she took a step with the aid of a cane, her mother stood by with proud, tearful eyes, cheering softly like a parent witnessing their child's first steps. The bond between them had become unbreakable, woven through shared meals, whispered conversations in the quiet of the hospital nights, and the countless hours they spent simply holding each other's presence like a treasure. Yet, in the back of DM's mind, there was always a shadow, a face she could never forget. Toan. The man who had risked everything to find her, who had cried for her beneath the canopy of that dark forest, his voice breaking through the wilderness as he called her name over and over. She remembered it vividly, the way his hands had held hers, desperate to protect her, to save her. She remembered his eyes, filled with pain and determination, refusing to give up even when the forest tried to swallow them both. But now, did he even know she was alive? One morning, as the sunlight spilled generously into the hospital room, DM sat on the bed, brushing her hair with slow, deliberate strokes. Her mother was tending to a small pot of flowers on the windowsill, humming a song from her youth. The scene was peaceful, almost perfect, but DM's heart stirred with longing. Me, DM said gently, using the word for mother in Vietnamese with such tenderness that it made the old woman turn around, smiling. There's something I need to do once I leave this place. Her mother's smile remained, though her eyes carried a knowing softness. You're thinking about the young man you spoke of in your dreams, aren't you? DM's cheeks flushed. She hadn't realized that even in her fevered sleep, Toan's name had escaped her lips. She nodded slowly. Yes. His name is Toan. He searched for me in that forest, and I left without him even knowing I was safe. I need to go back to the farm. I need to find him. The old woman crossed the room and sat beside DM, taking her hands into her own. Then you must go, my child, she said warmly. A heart cannot rest when it is still searching for someone it loves. Tears welled in DM's eyes, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. She had come so close to death, yet from the edge of despair, she had found two miracles, a mother who filled her emptiness, and the promise of a love that still waited for her out there. She leaned into her mother's embrace, breathing in the familiar scent of the woman who had saved her not just from the forest, but from a life of loneliness. When I find Toan, DM whispered, I'll bring him to meet you. I want you to meet the man who never gave up on me. Her mother smiled, eyes glistening. I would like that very much, my daughter. The decision was made. As soon as her body was strong enough, Diem would return to the farm, to the life she had almost lost, and to the man who deserved to know the truth, that she was alive, that she was whole, and that she had found a family to call her own. In her heart, she carried both the love of a mother and the hope of reuniting with Toan, knowing that life had given her a second chance, not just to live, but to love deeply and fully. And when that day came, she would no longer walk alone.